But Adam is going to do a presentation on the Webster Public Library and how it compares to its local peers. So, Adam Shaw, the time is yours.
Thank you, Tom, for the invitation to speak, to the town board for your time and attention tonight, everyone here. And of course, Jenny, our town board liaison, for her support of the library. Very much appreciated. So, I wanted to share with you all maybe some things about the Webster Public Library that maybe you already know, and maybe you might find surprising. So, I want to start off by setting a little context. First of all, the Webster Public Library was founded in 1929. For anybody checking the map, that means our centennial anniversary is in 7 years. We are a municipal public library, one of the 3 types of public libraries in New York State. We have a budget of about $2.2 million, which is allocated primarily by the town. That equates, in case you're wondering, to about 73 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. And for the average home in Webster, that's less than a Netflix subscription. However, our budget is also supplemented by 2 nonprofit organizations. The Friends of the Webster Public Library is a 501c3 that's made up of volunteers who support the library through things like their lobby sale, the book sale that they had earlier this month, and provide us with about $50,000. I think last year was a little over $50,000 of support, which equates to about 2% of our annual budget. Similarly, the foundation of the Webster Public Library is another separate 501c3, which started in 2010 from requests of individuals in Webster who love and wanted to support their library through their legacy. The foundation provides annual project-based funding throughout the year, which supports things like online resources, Wi-Fi hotspot lending, and building upgrades. They supply us with around $23,000 per year, or 1% of our annual budget. We are an independent member of the Monroe County Library System. You may have one of our library cards in your wallet now. The whole slogan there is one county, one card. That means your card that works here in Webster works at any other public library in the county. That benefits us in an innumerable amount of ways, but I will try to just do some of the highlights. First of all, our internet is provided at a 90% discount, managed by the Monroe County Library System using the E-rate program. On top of that, we have a consolidated public library catalog, so if you go online to our website, you do a search for your favorite author, your favorite book, you can see not only if Webster has it, but also any other library in the county. Speaking of, we've got trucks that deliver those books from those other libraries to the most convenient location, hopefully that's us, across the street, 5 days a week, and those books can be returned at any library that's convenient to you, and they will find their way back home. So essentially we have, even though it's not completely shared property, it's a shared collection among those 20 member libraries that we can benefit from. Now, we have about 45,000 square feet across the road here in the Webster Plaza next to Savers. We have about 64 employees, which changes based on the season. And we have about 211,000 holdings. And holdings is library lingo for all the cool stuff that we have. Our books, our DVDs, our GoPros, our hotspots, things like that. About 50% of that is physical books, what you would actually recognize as like a library thing. 38% of that is online resources. About 12% falls into this other category. That could be a hotspot, a video game, things of that nature. Since January 1st, we've had 12,386 visits on average per month. That, to kind of set the context of where we are after the pandemic started, we're at about 60% of our high figures that we saw in 2019. 2019, we saw record levels of visits, and we're about 60% of that right now. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see our library board. Our library board is in charge of the governance of the library, as well as the director selection and evaluation. And you can see them up there on the slide. We are a public library, so our meetings are open to our board meetings are open to the public, and we, value the public's input in those. Now, enough about us specifically. I wanted to give a little bit more context about how Webster Public Library kind of compares to our peers. So we are what's considered a large public library in Monroe County. That means we're a library serving over 30,000 residents. I will make a note, I'm excluding Rochester Public Library from this comparison. And the reason being is that an urban public library has a very different place in the community than a large town library. So they're excluded primarily so that we're getting an apples to apples comparison. To give you an idea, Rochester Public Library serves in the 250,000 range. The sources for this data are the 2020 census, the New York State Department of Library Development Service Areas, as well as the 2020 annual report. Now you may be wondering, why are you using the 2020 annual report instead of 2021? That's because the state library hasn't published those figures yet. So I'm using the most recent validated data that we have. So with that, our peers are Greece, Arundecoit, Henrietta, Webster, Fairport, Brighton, Penfield, and as of 2020, Pittsburgh, as they just went over the 30,000 mark. So now that I've given you kind of some of that context, I really want to focus on some of the statistics that can show you how we're doing or where Webster lies right now. So again, the population of the service area, this is what designates us as a large library. But it also sets some of the context. You can see, obviously, Greece is a large suburban library and much larger than some of our peers. But again, it is a suburb of Rochester. It's not a large urban library in the same way. So you can see we've got Greece, Arundecoit, Henrietta, Webster, Fairport, Penfield, Brighton, Pittsburgh, set in descending order. Just as a note, all of the following slides will be in that order. Greece will always be on the far left, Pittsburgh will be always on the far right, and there we are, Webster in the middle. And the reason that this is important is that the population of the service area not only illustrates the community we serve, but it also directly relates, of course, to our tax base, yes, but also state aid that we receive every year, but also costs for various services like online resources. Frequently, online resource vendors will say, what's the population of your service area, and charge based on a per capita basis. So one area where Webster is going above is that we have a lot of space in the plaza across the street. So you can see here, again, in the same order as before, on the left you'll see a purple bar. That is the absolute square footage of these individual libraries, and the axis for that is on the left. What you'll see next is a dark gray bar to the right of that. That is a per capita number of how much square footage per capita each of these libraries has. And across the middle, there's a light purple line. That light purple line is a per capita average for each of those peers so that we can accommodate for varying community sizes. So again, you can see we do have a lot of space in both absolute number and a per capita analysis. So I mention that because I'm trying to maybe set a level here. And so I want to move on to our operating expenditures. Our operating expenditures, on the other hand, Webster is right in the middle. Not only is our operating budget of about $2.2 million hitting right around average, but so is our per capita investment in that library. You can see here again kind of where our peers lie in terms of their operating budgets. And I will make a note, this was 2020. As a result, there were significant changes to most libraries to their various budgets, but that's true for every library in the sample. So again, you see that light purple line setting the per capita average, and there's Webster hitting just above the average there. Moving on, I think it would be fair to zoom into that and say, well, salaries and wages are often a significant investment of any organization. So how do we square up when it comes to our salaries and wages? Again, Webster is right around average. We're just below that per capita average line, as you can see here. And with most service-based organizations, this is a good proportion of our budget. And without it, the library would be an expensive warehouse. That said, we are right around the middle. And I will note that while salaries are the largest proportion of all of these libraries' budgets, Webster ranks second to last on our budget of 67% of our budget compared to the average of 76%. Now, I'm going to show you one area where Webster's maybe not doing so great. This is our collections budget. I think I mentioned holdings earlier. Collections, again, is the library's stuff. These are the books, these are the online resources, these are the materials that people come in to borrow. So you can see again on the left, we've got our absolute dollar figure. In 2020, Webster slashed its collections budget to about $52,000. I would say that one thing to note here is that you may see that dark gray dot above our bars. That represents what it will be in 2021 when the figures are validated. Furthermore, that $100,000 mark is about where Webster has been and will be. So 2020 was an outlier, but even if we adjust for that and assume the $102,000 level of 2021, we are still well below average compared to our peers. Our peers are spending a little north of $4 per capita, per resident, and we are down almost just above $1, or if you adjust for that, it would probably be in the $2 range. So we're spending half of what our peer libraries are in terms of investment in collections. And here's where a lot of that budgetary spend is going. Here you see the building and maintenance expenditures for all of the libraries that I've included here. This represents our rent that we pay to the plaza, as well as the common area maintenance charges for things like snow plowing that the plaza pays, as well as taxes that we have to pay, which is an unusual thing for a public library to have to pay. But we do rent, we don't own the building. And I want to note, there's one other library here that stands out with us, that's well above average. That's the Irondequoit Public Library. That's because in 2015, the Irondequoit Public Library built a new library and they went out to bond. So this represents their expenditure about 5 years in to paying off that bond. So again, we're spending an incredible amount of money on a space that the town does not have much control over. Now, I would say that there's another dark gray dot, and I'm including that kind of in the interest of full disclosure. Henrietta opened a brand new library in 2020 and will started paying off their bond in 2021. That gray dot represents where they will be in year one paying off their bond for their brand new library. So again, I point this out only to show where we're sitting in terms of our peers. One note that I'd like to make is that the only other library on this slide that rents is the Fairport Public Library. And you can see that they're right around the average in terms of their per capita cost for their building and maintenance expenditures. So it's, in terms of similarities there, they're not too far from us, they're also renting, but they're also not spending nearly as much as we are in terms of our building and maintenance. And again, Irondequoit and Henrietta own those buildings, and those costs will go down over time. You can see with Pittsburgh, the expenditure is almost zero because that is part of their town campus and the town-owned building. Now, I talked a lot about expenditures, and I think it would be a fair question of me to bring up our revenue, and I'm going to use that term in air quotes. Fines are traditionally the way that the library brings income in. As you can see here, of course, in 2020, there was a dramatic decrease. That's not a surprise. But what may surprise you is that in 2010, you can see we're right under, and I should say that this is a bar chart of all the libraries I've been comparing across the past 10 years. Fines, not only in Webster, fine revenue not only in Webster, not only in Monroe County, but nationwide have been declining naturally. So this revenue stream, for lack of a better word, has been naturally declining over time. And I will note, this is before any of these libraries have adopted any sort of fine-free policies. So all of these libraries were charging fines on library materials, and still that revenue continued to go down. And as I mentioned, this is a nationwide trend, so it's not something that we can magically snap our fingers and suddenly kind of bounce back in terms of revenue. So I just have a little bit more time with you, and I wanted to share some interesting results of a recent survey. The Monroe County Library System did a community-wide survey last year as part of their strategic planning. They asked residents, both library users and non-users, many questions about libraries. The responses I'm sharing are only either Webster Library users, who could live in other areas but prefer to use the Webster Library, or Webster residents who do not use the library. So first of all, Our Net Promoter Score is 65. If you're thinking of a GPA, 65 doesn't sound so good, but Net Promoter Score is a scale out of a -100 to 100. And many commercial organizations shoot for the 60 to 70 range. So I think we're doing really well there. And what was really buoying as a library professional was 94% of those respondents in Webster believe that the library is worthy of tax support. And you may think, well, sure, somebody who takes the time to answer a library survey, of course they're going to support the library. But there's an interesting caveat here. 74% of the people who responded, who said they are not library users, either agreed or strongly agreed with that same statement. So a significant portion of people who don't use the library, some of which I'll get into in a second, still believe that library is worthy of that support. 94% of people believe that the staff and volunteers are friendly and helpful, and I think that is a show that we're giving them a positive experience when people come through our doors. And one of the biggest narrative comments that came through is the availability of collections and materials through the Monroe County Library System, reducing our wait times and effectively expanding our collections even if we don't own this stuff. Now, areas that we could do better, library users primarily want two things. They want expanded hours and they want expanded collections. They want more print books, more e-books. And it is a common refrain at the desk that, I'm sorry, you're going to have to be on the wait list, you're so far down, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I think that harkens back to the current investment level of collections. Non-library users don't use the library because of three things. They forget to think of the library as number one. Number two, they say that the hours aren't convenient, again, speaking to the expanded hours that library users want. And there are a handful of people who say, I just prefer to purchase. And for many of those people, we actually benefit from their secondhand, gently used books, which donate to the Friends, and then we can use that revenue to help supplement our budget. So I think I've gone just slightly over my time, so I want to thank you all for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks, Adam. What's the square footage? I'm looking at the page for building maintenance expenditures, and the two libraries that rent spaces, Webster and Fairport, typically. The cost is per square foot, so we have 45,000 square feet. What is Fairport square footage? Because their rent is obviously significantly lower than ours, so.
Yeah, their square footage is 24,700 with an annual cost of about $3 a square foot. Our annual cost is about $9.70 a square foot.
Sorry, and how much is Fairport's per square foot?
About $3.
That's all inclusive, taxes, common area, costs and everything?
They're all their building and maintenance expenditures of that.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, anyway, thank you, Adam, for a very thorough presentation, and thank you for all the boards that we here today. It's been a lot to sit down here to support Adam and everything. And as a liaison for the library, also I would like to give my 2 cents worth. In my profession, leasing is never a good idea to me. It is not a good investment for our community and for the future of our library. So therefore, I noticed the rent that we are paying currently is $24.27, and the CAM is $8,977.13, and the taxes is $7,426.85. So the total monthly is $38,428.25. And the total for the year that we've been paying for this area we're renting is $461,499. That's an extraordinary, significant expense that we have to pay. And we're going to use that money toward, a building that we own, the town owns, so we can save taxes, and we can save a lot of things, and the profit, whatever we have, we can put toward programs for the children or for the adults. Because the library is a great resource for people to come every day, and it doesn't discriminate, who you are. everyone can benefit from it. And, you know, my granddaughter loved the library, I enjoy the library, and I know a lot of people here enjoy the libraries and everything, so that is my input, because I'm new to this board, so, and I'm still learning, but to me, this is significant, and it shouldn't have been that kind of money to go for the building, you know, renting out in the first place, so.
And
I think Jane summed up what is fairly clear, is where to go from here. I know we have a lease that we're bound to for a certain amount of time, I don't know when that lease is up.
It's up March 31st, 2017. So we've got just over nine and a half years. Over the life of the lease, we're paying about $6.5 million on rent, taxes, and property charges.
Did anyone look into it to see if we can try to do something?
I believe there's
Councilman
one-
Gale can answer that definitively. Yeah?
And we've had many, many discussions with respect to the rent and where we go from here. And I know Tom, we've had
Yeah.
conversations with the previous owner to see sold it.
Well, depending on who you talk to, I've heard through the grapevine that they may have a offer in principle, and that they're looking to fast track the closing in the third quarter of this year, somewhere in July, August, September. I have not heard that from the current owner. And the current owner did let me know that they would put it up for sale back a couple of years ago, so I guess I'll wait for that. I will say one thing that, and I don't disagree with Ginny at all, because I guess I come from a family, we always owned property. I remember when I rented for my business, it was just so foreign to me to do that, but that's another story. What the situation was 10 to 20 years ago when the town initially entered into this lease, I wasn't at the table. I really haven't studied the economics. That might have been a good decision back then. You know, hindsight is very easy to look back and say as we sit here in, May of 2022. It's not a good 9+ years left on that lease. Charlie, I know you've been involved in this. Paul Adams, Councilman Cahill, I'm telling you, the guy should be a private investigator. I mean, in the last 2 years, we really dissected that lease and have tried to see ways that we could get relief from it. And we haven't found it.
Well,
It's a
it
contract.
was a graduated
Yeah.
payment, and I think it started at $3 a square foot, I believe. It was a good deal for that, and they counted it at the bond building. We built a bond very much to build up. It was a library, back in 2000.
Bill?